This is Eyam, a small picturesque village in the Derbyshire Peak District. Back in 1665, the people of this place made one of the most extraordinary sacrifices in British history.
When the bubonic plague arrived here in the 17th century, the people of Eyam didn't flee. They chose to stay, knowing that it would likely mean their own deaths.
This wasn't the first time plague had hit England. It was the same disease that caused the Black Death in the 14th century, and it was spread by fleas living on rats. In 1665, it swept through London, killing thousands, and eventually it reached Eyam.
The plague's arrival in Eyam can be traced back to one single event: a bolt of cloth sent from London to the village tailor. Hidden inside the fabric were fleas carrying the plague.
Within a week, the tailor's assistant was dead, and the people in his household began to fall sick. The villagers must have been terrified. They had heard of the horrors that were unfolding in London. They knew how quickly the disease was spreading, and they knew that there was no cure.
By late summer, the village was in crisis. People were dying and they didn't know who would be next. Eyam's rector, William Mompesson, and his predecessor, Thomas Stanley, came up with a plan.
The villagers were presented with a choice. They could flee, and who could blame them if they chose to do that? But if they fled, then they risked carrying the plague further and then dooming the surrounding communities. Or they could stay. They could seal the village off entirely from the outside world, with no one coming in and no one going out.
Astonishingly, the villagers agreed to stay, knowing full well that it might cost them their lives. The village set up boundaries. Stones were placed on the outskirts and no one crossed them. People from the neighbouring towns left food and supplies there. In exchange, Eyam's villagers left coins soaked in vinegar, hoping it would kill the infection.
Church services moved outdoors to Cucklet Delph. This archway became Mompesson's pulpit, and from here he could preach to his congregation down in the valleys below. During the plague's outbreak, this place became known as the Cucklet Church.
Once a quarantine was in place, Eyam became a village of the dying and the waiting. Families locked their doors and waited for the plague to take them or pass them by. The Siddles were among the first to fall. William Siddle was the village sexton, and when his son died, he carried him to the churchyard and buried him. Days later, his wife and daughter followed. He dug their graves too. By the end of September, William Siddle was the only member of his family left. He sealed himself inside his house, hoping to escape the plague. It didn't matter. Within weeks, he was dead too.
One of the most harrowing stories from the plague is that of Elizabeth Hancock. In the space of just 8 days, she buried her husband and her 6 children. She had to dig the graves herself, and she had to bury their bodies herself. And it's in this spot here that we now call the Riley Graves.
We know much of this thanks to the letters William Mompesson wrote, which survive to this day. They offer us a grim account of what it was like to live and die under the shadow of plague. He describes the horror, the loss, and his growing isolation.
Mompesson also writes about his wife, Catherine, who had stayed beside him. She nursed the sick and she comforted the dying. And then she too fell ill and died. And Mompesson buried her with his own hands.
By the spring of 1666, the disease was at its peak. The death toll climbed relentlessly. Many of the victims were buried in the fields, gardens, or even at the edge of the village, anywhere where the ground could be broken quickly.
The plague lasted for just over a year, and by the time it had finished, around a third of the villagers were gone. 260 lives in a village of about 700 people. But the sacrifice worked. The plague never spread beyond Eyam.
Today, Eyam is known as the Plague Village, but the villagers' decision to isolate themselves changed how future outbreaks were handled, and in doing so, it saved many more lives.